And we are recording with Mitch, with Mike Termott on Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 at 12:36 p.m. Eastern Time. You are a libertarian candidate. That's as much as I understand, and we both agree that nothing should be censored. And but yeah, so I mean, just even now talking about, if you have on somebody that people don't agree with, I can't believe you had him on. I'm like, dude, I just wanted to hear what he had to
I
say,
think that that's what makes it most fun, right?
Yeah.
If you only
Yeah.
had people on with whom you agreed all the time, at some point you got to wonder, why are you doing this?
Well, no,
Like,
no, but that's legitimately that's like the line I use is I'm like if I'm conservative leaning, if my guest is conservative leaning and my audience is conservative leaning, what are we doing?
what are
We're
we doing?
I like blue. I like blue. I like blue too.
We
Good.
could just call each other on the phone.
Could have been an email
Or
and
we
then
could
we don't have
not
to do a
talk at
show.
all.
Exactly. So the conversation comes from, like respectful friction. That's what it is. But
Yeah,
please introduce
agreed.
yourself. And guys, you can go to the description, go to the website, go check them out, all that good stuff. But please introduce yourself.
I am seeking the Libertarian Party's presidential nomination. I believe that I will secure it later on this month, around the 25th. We have an open convention in Washington. It's going to be very exciting. If anyone considers themselves mostly libertarian and would like to show up, it's a good time in Washington, D.C. at the Hilton. I'm a professional economist by background. Uh, Spent a lot of time in commercial finance when I got out of engineering school and business school. Went back to grad school at GW, a very free market oriented program, which put me in good stead. It fit with my priors, as they say. Worked for the White House for a couple years as an economist. I was a professional advocate for free markets and greater competition, mostly in the financial services space. For about a decade after that, I had another decade of running my own business in executive education, strategic consulting, mostly financial institutions and some nonprofits. I've taught economics at 3 different universities. And as a second career in public policy, public service, I guess I would characterize it, I was a police officer. I was on the road for 11 and a half years in South Florida in Broward County from the age of 49 to 60, which is to say until just a couple of years ago, all as a registered libertarian. Wonderful experience. I was able to find a police department that fit with my personal interest, which is to say, it had a separate vice unit, so I didn't have to get involved with the stuff that I personally considered dopey, like the war on drugs, no pun intended.
Hmm.
And I had a good experience. Why I spend so much time now talking about the reforms I believe that we need to our criminal justice system and how we manage police agencies and police officers. And because I'm an economist by trade, I spend a lot of time talking about fiscal policy. I spend a lot of time talking about monetary policy. And because I've traveled all over the world and a lot, and I've taught international trade, international finance, I spend a lot of time talking about what I believe are important changes we need to make in our foreign policy as well.
Do you think that the public is generally so I'm 33, I've voted well, I've been alive for 4 elections, I've voted in three.
Yep.
Do you think it's more primed than ever for a someone who's not a Republican or a Democrat? I mean, it's getting. I mean, you could say this 4 years ago, but now it's even more so. It's like it's getting a little wild out there, and you can look at it as things are flying apart, or you can look at it as the iron's hot. You can strike it and you can change it. Do you think that there's more receptivity to it now?
Yeah, and I think so for a lot of probably bad reasons. I think there's a lot of things going wrong.
Sure.
I think a lot of Americans are waking up to the idea that some of our largest problems are the result of bad public policy, that bad public policy doesn't just fall off of a tree, it's the result of politicians, elected officials, and bureaucrats, unelected officials, who operate with what I would argue is largely a different set of values, at the very least, a different way of looking at the world. But I would argue a different set of principles than with which most Americans would, conduct their lives and therefore make decisions that most Americans wouldn't make. I think there's a growing sense of authoritarianism in the United States regarding our government. I think it's on both sides of the aisle. It's from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And so there is a confluence of a lot of reasons why people are more open to change. And I'm not trying to suggest I'm a political savant here, right?
Sure.
I think most people are able to look at the Republican likely nominee and the Democratic Party likely nominee and say, whether you look at polling data or just anecdotally or just your own personal perception, these are candidates that are somewhat problematic in terms of their popularity, in terms of how they present themselves, in terms with the weirdness surrounding each one of them for different
Mm,
reasons. And so all these things present an opportunity for an outsider, for a third party. The Libertarian Party is not just a third party, but the third party.
mhm.
So I think there's a big opportunity, but I also would argue that it's more than just an opportunity. It's in some sense there's an obligation to get this right. I think there's a growing sense that if we're waiting for a Republican politician or a Democratic politician to lead the charge back toward a constitution of the limited powers, to lead the charge back toward a foreign policy that is less bent on the projection of military hegemony, to lead the charge back toward fiscal sanity, uh, monetary policy sanity. I don't see those things as likely to happen. And so for those of us who believe in some of these relatively fundamental principles, I'm not introducing new concepts here, right? These are fairly traditional American values. I think if you believe in those and that those ought to have primacy, I think you've got to look elsewhere than the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
And for from at least from my understanding of, relatively modern American history is, it's you can left this, right that, but so long as the basics are there, a lot of people don't care. And they might not like to hear it, but the reality is they don't truly care. So long as gas isn't that much, food is affordable, and in general things are okay. Things that people think that they are steadfast on, they're not really that hardcore. They think they're pro or anti-abortion. And I'm not saying there aren't people that are die hard for that. For the most part, though, I mean, if you can go to the grocery store, drive home on roads that, and there aren't, military checkpoints,
Right.
you're more likely to look at someone and go, ah, I didn't vote for him. And then it's kind of, but it's getting the cracks are so massive and unignorable now that, I mean, even now you're seeing, if this was 5 years ago, you'd see the majority of conservatives saying, the LOL, look at the libs getting owned on these campuses. Versus, I've never
Right.
seen this before. I see conservative people that I'm friends with that have interviewed former like military guys, whereas like as like right wing as you can get. I've had them looking at this and being like, why, how come why are Republicans cheering on the state? Like, what is wrong with protesting? Like, how
Right.
can you say, how can you be for, any peaceful protest on January 6th and not be for and that may not seem like a lot, but just 4 years ago, it would have been like, LOL, own the libs. And now you have people being like, hey, I hate those people with like the blue mohawks, but why are we cheering on the state? That's crazy. That is crazy. It may not seem like much,
That's an
but that is
important
crazy.
change.
It is very
Yeah.
important.
I agree with you. I think there's a different attitude toward the extent to which we trust the state at any level of government.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's for cause. I don't think it's I don't buy the idea that we as an American population have changed all that much. I think that we've had our eyes open to a number of things that we probably should have our eyes open to a long time
Well, things
ago.
have been so good for so long, relative to the rest of the world, post World War II to really, I don't know, maybe like right after 9/11.
Yep.
It's been pretty fire. It's been pretty good here, right?
It's been pretty good. And there have been some really important events that have awakened us to the idea that it's not necessarily going to be all as so good and so easy. I would point to what we sometimes refer to as the COVID regime, right?
Mhm.
We learned that the government can exert quite a bit of force in terms of locking down big pieces of our economy, big pieces of our society, big pieces of our culture. And I think that we learned that there's an attitude that comes from a lot of politicians that doesn't necessarily fit with our own. And I think that that correctly makes a lot of people nervous about the future. You know, what will the next big, weird, fearful thing be that a certain number of politicians try to use to leverage your fear to get you to do weird things? I think that we learned that not only can the government make you do certain things, but the government can do so in a way that is not clear, not honest, not open, that the government will hide things from you, that the government in some cases will lie to you, will keep data from you about the development of the vaccines, for example. And now we have information coming out 2 and 3 and 4 years later when it's too late, that the government will engage in censorship in social media in order to control the narrative and get its point out. I don't think it's the American public that's changing. I think that there are so many examples of the government behaving in weird ways. I would also point to, in each of the different spheres of public policy, really stark examples of behavior that does not fit with most Americans would decide. In terms of foreign policy, you know, you go through the 80s and the 90s, and there's, you know, various interventions and skirmishes and things that maybe you didn't like. But look, it's hard to look at the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq and ignore the fact that it wasn't billions of dollars that we spent, it was trillions. And it wasn't thousands of lives lost, it was over 1 million.
1.5 million civilians and 7,500 American servicemen and women. And that doesn't,
That's a
I think it's
big
over
deal.
90, I think it's over 90,000 military suicides from 2001.
That's a big deal. That's hard to ignore. These are not the results of decisions that most Americans would have made if they were in charge.
It wasn't a bad, it wasn't a bad airstrike where it's like, oh my God, we killed civilians. This was daily for 2 decades.
That's a big deal. That means that the system itself is making decisions that you wouldn't like, that you wouldn't make, that the incentive structure is such that the system keeps propagating these types of decisions because, you know, the individuals involved who are making decisions would turn over, right? It wasn't like, you know, one
Of course.
dude making these decisions for 20 years.
It's an eddy in a river. It's as the philosopher Alan Watts would say about patterns. It's no same water molecules going through twice, but that whirlpool is there. What about the wind? You've probably never been hit by the same, oxygen molecule.
Absolutely. But the program that people have instituted is such that it will propagate this type of decision making. Look at our monetary policy. I don't think most Americans are aware that the following is not a metaphor. It's actually the way it works. We decide the most important price in the world, the short-term interest rate in the US dollar, by locking up 12 people in a room every 6 weeks and asking them basically what mood they're in. That's how it works. That's not a metaphor. That's not an analogy. That's how it's actually done. And I think that if you were to explain this to most Americans and say, this is how we set the price of tobacco in India, they would say, that strikes me as stupid. And then you say, it's actually how we set short-term interest rates in the US dollar. It's the most important price in the world. I think
That
most Americans would probably say that's bullshit.
that
You're
sounds like
teasing me.
that sounds like bullshit. I have a biology degree, so I don't. Is that actually? I mean, do you ever watch South Park? Do you remember like right after 2008 financial crisis, he's trying to return a blender and it's going. He's like, well, it's owned by this corporation, which is owned by that, which is actually all their debt is, put together in
Yeah,
a package. And he goes up and up and up till he gets to the Federal Reserve. And he goes, how does it all? And he goes into the building, and it's a big like Wheel of Fortune thing, and it just says like bailout, invasion, assassination, start a war. And what they do is they chop off a chicken's head and play a kazoo, and where it drops, that's how they. And he just goes, "Oh fuck!" Like, but that is it, right? But it's like, how much is this? It's a Margaritaville blender, and they're like 33 trillion. He's like, what? And you can see on the board, it's like invade Syria, kill the president, and you're like,
Right.
oh no, like, is that's how that's how the interest rate's chosen? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. That's how
Can you expand on
the
that?
Fed funds rate is the interest rate at which banks trade money on a daily basis among themselves. And that's the hottest, shortest interest rate that we have, the hottest, shortest market for the US dollar. And then all short-term interest rates play off of that, right? And long-term interest rates are affected by that, but they're affected by a lot of other things that, the market determines that the Fed cannot affect directly. But that's how short-term interest rates are determined. And one might say, well, okay, I've got a problem with that based on principle. Maybe that strikes me as a values or even an ethical problem, but at least as a practical matter, it works pretty well. No, it turns out it doesn't. It turns out that research shows that if you had a simple rule in place that said the Fed is not allowed to create any amount of money that it wants to affect what interest rates are, that the rule was we're only going to let the Fed create a certain amount of money so that we target 0% inflation. If that were the rule, it turns out research shows, not perfectly. I mean, like all research, it's a bit of a shot in the dark. I get that. But research suggests that we would have done a better job of mitigating against the boom bust cycle than we have with this discretionary, everybody in the room votes type of system. And so what we've got is a system that over 100 years has proven that it doesn't work very well. And it's set up in a way that just doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. I mean, I spent all of my early years as an economist worrying about these markets. And I can tell you that many, many economists view this as considerably silly. But this is the system that we have, and we need to try something else. As another example, I think that most Americans would not decide. I think it's a good idea to have $35 trillion in debt issued by the Treasury Department to finance the expansion of the federal government, representing over, here's a number that I don't think most Americans appreciate, over $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. That's a lot of, I'm sorry, that's a lot of money. As a guy who lives on a police pension, I can tell you that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that right. 330 million times 1,000, 330 billion times 100 would
35
be 33. No, you're
trillion
right. Yeah, you're right.
divided by 300 million people, right? Less than 350 million people.
Sure.
That's a lot of money. And all of that needs to be serviced on an annual basis. We have to pay interest on that continuously. It has to be turned over. And so in the long run, that is the amount that we owe. A lot of people say, well, you never really pay it back. Yeah, you do. You're paying interest on it forever until you do pay it back. That does represent the amount of money that has been borrowed in order to prop up our way of life that has to be serviced and paid back at some point. Much of the burden will fall on all of us for the rest of our years, but especially on, youngsters. You will pay more than I will, and your children, God willing, will pay on that as well. This does not, just as an ethical prop, never mind the math, right?
Sure.
Let's not call in mathematicians and economists here. As an ethical proposition, this is not a decision that most Americans would make. If you were, consider the following. If you were to drop a baseball off of the top of the Empire State Building, and the first person who picks it up, you make president of the United States, you would almost certainly wind up with someone who would be more fiscally conservative than the decisions that have been made that have led us into this insane position. Almost assuredly. Americans, by and large, don't live their lives this way, right? I mean, you don't find a lot of grandparents saying, the object of the game is to borrow as much money as possible because I want to fuck my kids.
Yeah, no, you would be, if any one person acted this way, you'd be evicted, if not killed by a loan shark.
Right.
But legitimately, like that,
right.
Then what does one actually do? Well, you mean, because you and I are just chatting, and I don't have to do anything. But for the people listening that sometimes I forget because I'll have on candidates and I'll forget that I'm doing like a podcast with a candidate. I'll be like, oh shit, we gotta. What realistically can be done, and not to be blackpilled and say nothing, because then what's the point of doing anything?
Right.
Eat your gun.
I don't think the answer is nothing.
No, that's never the answer.
At least I'm gonna test the proposition that we can do something about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And look, the federal government of the United States is going to face a financial collapse before the middle of the century. So I don't think the right answer is, let's take the next 80 years to figure this out. That's not an answer.
The problem, though, is they also have the biggest military in the history of the planet.
By far.
So it gets a little, this is the analogy I use. Say I go to a loan shark in the city, go get $100,000 or whatever. Through this podcast, I've befriended Delta Force operators, the apex predators of the planet.
Yes.
If I hire them, what in God's name is the loan shark's local, greaseball mafia wannabes? They're going to roll up. I'm going to have guys with silenced rifles and night vision goggles. You're not going to roll up on me. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is, I love the analogy, by the way. The problem is that
the thing is if you're watching me, you're going to go, sorry to interrupt. If you're watching me, someone's going to go, that guy, this isn't going to be pretty, man. That guy's going to use those Delta Force operators. He's not going to give up control. That's where I look at this. I go, this isn't good.
Agreed.
They're going to do something.
Totally agreed. I think it is a messed up situation. I do like your analogy a lot. The problem is that this is not what you would probably decide to do at the onset, because here you are, now you've set up your life in a situation where you've got to be surrounded by mercenaries to stay alive, right? This may not be the way that the lifestyle of choice may not be paranoid, one where you hold up in the studio in the back of your house because, you double crossed the wrong people. Look, there are specific things that we can do. And it does begin with a change in political leadership. And I don't mean it necessarily like either I become president of the United States or we're all fucked. I didn't mean it quite like that.
There is an element. I think that's a campaign that people need. I think we're tired. I think we're tired of platitudes of make America great and I'm with her and build back. But I think we need something a little more hardcore.
Yeah, hire me or go fuck yourself.
Yeah, you would get more than one person be like, I'm listening.
No, absolutely you would. And there is a way to say that. But look, you need what I would characterize as a libertarian oriented administration. And the changes that you need to make begin with stopping the government from spending so much money. You can institute a cap. Congress will go along with the cap before they will go along with picking out specific programs to cut back. Nobody wants to take a vote to end Social Security.
But if you put a cap on everything, you can go, hey, this is the rule. It's a way of
that asshole Mike, who's in the White House, is the one who's cutting everything back.
Yeah, you can. The buck stops here. Right? You can be Truman.
Right. That's exactly right. So you can get them to go along with an overall cap much more easily. That's the first piece. And the reason that's so important is because in the Libertarian Party, we have an expression, taxation is theft, right? Which is true. It's not merely an expression, it's actually true. But so is inflation theft. And so is all the debt that we're eventually going to have to service and pay back is a form of theft also. All of it comes from the government spending. And whether you finance it through inflation or debt or taxation, all government spending is theft. It's a dollar that the government is spending that you can't. So that's where it has to begin, is by capping spending. Now, in addition to formally imposing a cap, an administration can pare back how much it spends. It can unilaterally sequester resources to a certain extent, not to the extent to which you need, but to a certain extent. And the government can, the White House can do a number of things to change policy that helps us save money and helps our economy grow and creates more freedom. For example, we can replace the head of the Federal Reserve System with people who behave the way that we want them to behave, who believe in a rules-based system rather than just the silly discretion of issuing as much money as they feel like. That would winnow down the power of the Federal Reserve System until we're able to move legislation against it and sunset the organization lock, stock, and barrel and harden up our dollar. That's a two-step process. As another example, there are things that a libertarian-minded administration can do regarding our regulatory structure. You can, through executive order, make much of the federal government's regulatory apparatus subject to the approval of governors in their respective states, which, of course, in a place like California might not mean much. But in plenty of other states, there are governors who would damn well take you up on it and say, effectively, we're going to nullify federal regulation in our state. We're going to take the bull by the horns, set up our own regulatory regime. Imagine if a governor were to say, this is my favorite example, but there's probably 1,000 just as good. Imagine if a governor were to stand up and say, we're no longer going to subject applicants to begin a new nuclear reactor to generate electricity for the people of this state. We're no longer going to subject them to federal regulation. We're going to issue our own permit. And I have figured out a way, good people of my state, I have figured out a way to get these people to break ground in 18 months, not 18 years. If you show up with the financial backing and you look like you can walk and chew gum, you know, maybe it's not for everybody. But if you show up with the financial backing, so if something goes wrong, I know you can take care of business, which is pretty much all a libertarian would demand. I can get you up and running in less than a couple of years. That's a pretty attractive proposition. And that's the kind of thing that makes a huge impact in reducing the cost of energy, which has a huge impact on the extent to which we can expand our economy. That's just one example, but I think you get my point, is that there are very, very important things a White House can do. And of course, in foreign policy, you have even more control.
The U.S. empire and its hegemony, at what point do ideals clash with reality, right? You and I can go, murder's bad, death is bad. I lost an older brother to suicide 10 years ago, right? Death sucks, funerals suck, and they might be brown people and over there, but a drone strike on people are people. At what point do you also then, do you get pulled into the room by the general and you're looking at it and it's like, well, this is, World War II. I mean, I highly doubt any pilots firebombing Dresden loved it. I'm sure, they talk about he could smell the burning flesh 5 miles up. I would imagine a lot of them probably suffered PTSD. They're not necessarily gung-ho about it. But then there's
Yep.
a reality of, all right, well, Pearl Harbor and you have the Nazi war machine and we're doing this and the Soviets have already lost 27 million people. At some point, you do have to have like a very real, like, hey, if you're starving to death and you're I don't know, you're in the middle of eventually you're gonna kill your dog, which is your best friend, and you're gonna eat it. It's just what it is. where does idealism and romanticism, the U.S. empire should be scaled back. We shouldn't be dumping $1 trillion a year into weapons. At what point does that flowery idea smash up against the wall of an expanding communist China? Like where does, and that's the quintillion-dollar question. So you don't have to have the answer, but
It
that
is. It is the quintillion dollar question. It is an extremely important issue. And I think that depending on which theater you're talking about, there's a slightly different answer. The general theme is that military hegemony on the part of the United States does not make us safer. It just doesn't, even when there is a competing power. And there are those who would argue, including myself, that it is especially the case when there's a competing power that our projection of military hegemony makes us less safe.
mm,
China being the leading example. Our policy toward Taiwan makes us less safe, not more safe. The chances of us getting into World War III are substantially greater because of our attitude toward Taiwan than they would be if we had a different attitude. And I think that even most Republican politicians, pick out the most hawkish, would agree that we have created a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy regarding Taiwan, that we have said, now in my view, it's a mistake. I understand a Republican politician might just say, we did the right thing. In my view, it was a mistake to have sent this signal in the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean, go back 60, 70 years. We made a mistake by sending the signal that we would back up Taiwan, that we have pursued officially a strategy of strategic ambiguity, of not answering this question. But by not answering the question, we've pretty much sent the signal that we would potentially go to war over Taiwan's independence. By sending that signal, we have invited investment into Taiwan, which we now believe we cannot live without. We now believe that chips
mm-hmm.
produced in Taiwan, especially the high-end chips, especially
High-end
those that we
fabrications.
believe that we need for AI. We believe that this industry is something that we cannot live without. And therefore, if it fell into the wrong hands, we'd be screwed. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We sent the signal that this is where you should invest. And now we believe that we have to protect it, right? Whereas I believe the right message is to investors. If you need to build in a place where you can be confident that the Defense Department of the United States government will back you up come hell or high water, can I interest you in Des Moines or Milwaukee?
Put it out in NORAD. Why can't we have a fabrication factory under 2,000 feet of granite? We did it in the
There are
50s.
places where we will provide the service of ironclad defense, but it doesn't have to be Taiwan. It doesn't have to be dozens of miles from the People's Republic of China. That's silly. Now, the People's Republic plays a long game that Washington doesn't.
The 100-year marathon, 1949, 2049.
100-year marathon. Absolutely. If you were to say to Beijing, not in public, but if you were to send this signal, you can have your cake and eat it too. We understand what you want. You want Taiwan repatriated. We don't like the idea, but it's not our war, right? And we don't have any intention of going to war over it. Now, what I mean by that
Give us
is
10
after
years to
we've
get the
cleared out,
fabrication
after
factories
we
up.
have unwound our obligation and commitment there.
Take it.
All you have to do is be patient. And patience to a Chinese government is a small price for them to pay to get what they want.
Mm.
And should be a small price to pay for us to avoid World War III.
Mm.
Does it really undermine American safety if China and Taiwan go to war without us? If chips are manufactured in Des Moines?
Not if we had our own domestic, yeah, our own.
That's
I mean,
exactly right.
when I was
Even if
young,
it were in France, you know, it would be a much better
But if we're gonna
situation.
up and move it, might as well put it here. I mean, when I
If
was
we're going to up
younger,
and move it, might as well be here.
when I was
And
younger,
that's a
I loved the
decision that investors can make.
yeah, sorry. When I was younger, I always loved the idea of like Fortress America. And then as I got older, I was like, that doesn't really work. But now I'm kind of going back to it. I'm like, no, I think it does. Well, we have to extend ourselves around the globe. Why? Well, because that's where we get our chips. Why aren't we getting our chips
Why?
here? Why can you not bring everything home? And then, yeah, build a strategic defense initiative. Make a, what Smedley Butler say, like three things should be defended: the borders, the coasts, and the Bill of Rights. Right? I mean, like, why not? Why can't you do that? Well,
You can do that.
mm,
And like I say, you don't even have to get it all the way inside the border, but leaving it dozens of miles from the PRC, that's probably not the best place.
yeah, yeah,
There,
it's a live wire that you're like, hey, just can you
of
not?
course it is. It's completely dopey. The other thing that needs to be said out loud is that foreign aid in general is not a good investment.
Oh,
Now, I've got an ethical problem. I got a values problem with foreign aid. I don't like taking money from Americans, including a lot of families who are among those that can least afford it, right? I don't
Appalachia.
like taking money from Americans and using it to send abroad for what? To buy influence or to project military control. It turns out that even if the ethics didn't bother you, it turns out that it's not a very good investment, that we don't actually buy a lot of influence. And if if there were those who needed to be convinced of that, all you have to do is look at the Middle East today, where no one behaves the way that the White House is telling him to. No one, no one, not one player is behaving the way the White House wants him to. Now, never mind whether the White House is doing a good job or not. I would argue the White House is asking people to do a lot of stupid things. But as a practical matter, the White House has given billions of dollars to the Israeli government, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to the Palestinian Authority, to the governments of Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. And they have all told President Biden in one way or another to go pound sand. So, how do you feel? You could have pretty much gotten the same answers if you had given all those people stone cold zeros over the past decade, but
Mm.
you didn't. And now you've got the worst of both worlds. You're out the money, you don't have influence. And by the way, these people are making decisions you don't like, and you're being held accountable. The White House is politically accountable for decisions made by the Israeli government, whether you love those decisions or not. How does that feel?
Mm.
And I have another prediction. Here's my prediction. Before the end of 2024, the Israeli government will come to the conclusion that its relationship with the American government is not even in its interest, that going without a few $1 billion of aid every year is just not worth it, that taking a few $1 billion is not a great deal of money for a nation whose GDP per capita is 3/4 of ours. This is not a poor country. That they will eventually decide we need to be able to set our own course. We need to be able to set our own foreign policy objectives, and we need to decide how to execute on those. And I don't appreciate, this is what I believe the prime minister of Israel is going to say, whether it is Netanyahu by the end of the year or not, and that's not at all clear. But whoever it is, I predict he or she will be saying, we need a more independent foreign policy and not have Washington crawl all over my ass every time we decide to do what we need to do to take care of business.
Mm.
And I'm not suggesting that the Israeli government has been making decisions the way that I would or the way you would. In fact, I would be doing a hell of a lot very, very differently. But the point is, more fundamentally, I think that they're going to decide that this is not a relationship that is all that it had been cracked up to be.
Right. Henry Kissinger. It's dangerous. What is it? It's harmful to be our enemy. It's lethal or fatal to be our ally.
It
Right.
can be.
You see that meme where it's it's at night. And it's like a time lapse. It's like a 30-second time lapse. It's the ballistic trajectory of a bunch of rockets coming from Gaza. And then it's like the kind of the swirly trajectories of the Iron Dome, right? They're all,
Right,
burning fuel and they're
right.
just coming at each other. And over the Iron Dome it says my tax dollars, and then over the Hamas rockets it goes somehow also my tax dollars. That kind of cuts it. You're like, wait, what are we even, huh?
Yeah,
Like, what in
yeah.
God's name are we?
Why are we in this game? Because you got to ask yourself, is it really all that much better for American involvement? Like, how much worse would it be if the American government had not been involved?
Mm.
It's not clear to me that it would be one bit worse, not one bit. You have to admit that a great deal of the Iranian government's interest in controlling the Middle East is to get the American government out of it.
The difficult amongst other things, the difficulty
Amongst
with
other things.
amongst
Absolutely. I
other
don't mean to
things.
make it sound
No,
completely
no, sure, no,
simplistic.
of course not. But on a on a limited podcast, we can't flesh out the cures to all the world's problems, even though you and I have all of them, but people just don't know that. But no, it's a hard thing to go to because you don't have a controlled. You can't run a controlled. It's like you can't run a controlled experiment on does Fortress America work or does it not? I mean, you can gamble and it might work, but what if we go 20 years and we de-arm and then in 20 years it's like we're just getting steamrolled by China and we're like, yeah, it didn't work. It's like, well, tough, it's over. It's over, right? It's you've
Yeah,
come to a fork in the
I
road.
get that. I get
That's a
that.
tough one. And that's not on you. That's just in objective reality. That's a
That is an objective reality, but so is the fact that the system we have now is not working.
no.
We are not getting further from World War III. I think most Americans would agree, and most foreign policy so-called experts would agree, that we live in every bit as dangerous a time as we did 10, 20, 30, and 40 years ago.
Mm.
I think you'd also have to admit that the conflict in Ukraine didn't just fall off of a tree. That I don't like being cornered into being an apologist for Vladimir Putin. The guy is an asshole of the highest order, and he runs a government that is one of the very few on this planet that makes ours look smart. So, don't mishear me. But he is dealing with an incentive structure that was substantially affected by the United States push to include Ukraine in NATO. That's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it. And so don't tell me that the invasion of Ukraine was completely independent of the fact that he didn't want Ukraine becoming a NATO nation, just like he said. And I don't believe that there is a domino theory effect starting with Ukraine. I just don't buy it. I don't buy the idea that we need to worry about the Russian army finally being able to overrun Ukraine and then, oh, that was so easy and such a good idea. Poland is next. I don't buy that at all.
You also can't hold both views of Putin's a dunce and a 2-day operations turned into 2 years, and then in the same breath go and he's taking over France next week.
Right.
Which one is it? Is Trump an idiot or is he an evil genius? You cannot have both.
You
And
cannot have both.
and I'm with you. And it's if you do anything close to even taking a stance on something, you're immediately backed into a corner of taking a side. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's like, which side are you on? Are you on Israel or are you on Gaza? And I'm like, I'm on the United States. Y'all do whatever you're gonna do. You go
Right.
for it. Go for it. Are you
But
Russia or
please stop doing
Ukraine?
it with our money.
Exactly. Are you Russia or Ukraine? I'm Tommy and I'm from the United States. God bless. Go do whatever you. Well, they're gonna kill each other. Not my problem. Sorry, but it's not. And so long as there
And
are
it's okay to say that sucks.
Yeah, it's okay to go, hey, that sucks. Guess what? We have 22 veteran suicides a day. We have 100,000 people my age and younger dying of fentanyl every year. We have an unmitigated human trafficking crisis at the border, and we are the highest producer of child sex slaves in the world. We got a little more on our plate. Until this is all peachy and lifespan's 100 years old and murder's down to zero. I don't care. You know why? Because they don't care about us, and that's also fine. It's okay to love your country first. Russia shouldn't care about us, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have to pay my rent to balance my bills. I don't care about your rent, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say you don't really care about mine, and that's fine. It's not an apathetic thing to say. It's not a cold thing to say to go, there's nothing I can do. No, because they don't care about us, and nor should they.
That is
I'm your vice
exactly.
president.
you, you and I might have to work on the lingo,
We will.
but I think that that is exactly right, and I think that that is the correct attitude. And it is true that we do have significant problems in the United States, some of which are related to our bad decision making in a financial sense. And as you correctly point out, many are the direct effects of our military interventionism around the world. And I
Mm.
just don't think it's the case that most Americans would look at our military interventions and say, sure, it cost us a few thousand lives and some billions of dollars, but it was a good idea. It was worth it. I'm glad we did that. I just don't think that bucket has examples in it.
No, I think that ended with World War II. I think there was justified sacrifice, and it's easy for me to say being born in 90. I think you had a lot of people that were like that they did save the world, right?
Right.
You
And
obviously
that's not to say that mistakes weren't made, because
sure.
our policy in the Pacific leading
Well,
up
it
to Pearl
led to the
Harbor,
Pearl Harbor. Yeah, I mean, well, then that's a whole another bucket you start unwinding. You're like,
that's a whole nother bucket.
what was
So,
War Plan Orange? It was a plan to invade Japan, go back to the 20s. You're like, wait, hold on, wait, what?
uh-oh,
Yeah,
uh-oh.
yeah.
Yeah, I wish I didn't know.
And then you're
Blah,
like,
blah, blah,
and then
blah,
you're
blah,
like, but
blah.
Eisenhower said the military. It's like 30 years prior, Smedley Butler was saying the same thing, and 20 years prior to that, Woodrow Wilson was saying something similar. And you're like, oh shit, how deep does this go? Yeah, no,
Right.
it goes back to forever, which I mean, and it's a lot of the turmoil is self-inflicted. It's not an accident. It didn't fall off a tree like you said.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think a different attitude would put us in a better position as a practical matter. And and here's where I keep coming back. It's hard for me not to. I just don't believe that what Americans consider to be their core values are represented by the people making decisions in their name. I think most of these have an ethical component. These are not issues that, oh, I got to get my calculator, and, I need to change, carry the three, and, oh, I've got our solution. That's not what we're talking about here. These are profoundly values laden decisions that are made in a different way than I think they would be if they aligned with Americans' basic ethics.
It's kind of coming back to Trump's line from his 2016 campaign, to the blacks in the inner cities. What do you have to lose? But it's kind of getting now to you go, what do you have? I mean, really, I mean, what do you have to lose?
Right.
We just gave another tenth of a trillion to three other nations. What do you have to lose? Well, I can't vote for a third party. Why?
Really, really,
Well, because I
because
got to preserve the status. Well,
right,
yeah,
things
no,
are
I got to
going
preserve
so well.
this gem. The whole like millions of illegal immigrants and the fentanyl. I want to keep this. Wait, do I? Do I want to defend
Yeah.
this thing?
Do
Yeah.
you do you really? Because it seems to me that if you don't start voting on your values instead of, your team, if you don't start voting for your values, you're not going to change the system enough that it'll ever reflect your values. You got
Mm.
to adopt a little bit of a long game. If you really believe that I can't win in 2024, which I personally think is bullshit, I think I can, but that's because I'm a crazy fuck. But
Yeah, yeah, that's the only way
if
to go through this world.
it is, I've tried going through the the world up until now without so much of that, and I
Sanity
don't.
doesn't work when no one else is
Yeah, it
playing by
doesn't
the
work as
rule.
well.
No.
But if you really don't believe that I or another libertarian can win in 2024, adopt a longer view.
Sure.
Take a 5 or 9 year view instead of a 1 year view, and start voting for your values and forcing the other parties to better align with you. Get them to move toward you. Get them to take into consideration your views, your values, your ethics. Force them to move. Every time you vote for a Republican, you're sending the signal that they're on the right track, that everything that they're doing is okay. And every time you vote for a Democrat, you're sending them the same signal. And that's fine if that's how you really feel, but make sure you feel that way before you cast that vote, because the Republican Party, as a practical matter, just no longer stands up for fiscal conservatism and free markets. It's just not the case. The Democratic Party no longer stands up for the First Amendment. It no longer stands up for your civil liberties. Uh, for all of the reasons that people of my generation joined the Republican Party, those, to no small extent have gone away. And most of people in my family are Democrats. They joined that party for
Mm-hmm.
for arguably rational reasons.
Sure,
And the
opposed
people in my
Vietnam, and yeah.
family and that party have gone in two different directions.
Mm. It's one thing when I was a sophomore in college in 2010, I remember I was like, I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And I was like, yeah, but that's so long. And I remember thinking, I was like, one day, so I was like, it's 4 more years of college, and then it's 4 years of medical school, and then 6 years of residency. I was like, I'd be 29. And I remember it dawned on me, I was like, I'm gonna be 29 one day anyway. And I went,
Anyway,
yeah, and I went ahead and I got into medical school, and I decided not to go, but I'm 33 now. And for the same reason, when I started this podcast 5 years ago, I remember thinking this might take like 10 years to turn into like an actual like stable revenue source. And I just remember thinking 10 years is going to pass. I'd rather 10 years pass and be my own boss and do something cool and create. And I've
10
kind of,
years is going to happen one way or another. You're not going to
yeah,
stop the 10 years.
no. And so one thing, I mean, I've always that's always been my critique to people who are like, don't throw away your vote with third party. I'm like, I don't entirely disagree. Sure. 10 more election cycles are going to pass. And do you want to be going, don't throw away your vote, they only get 0.2% of the vote? Or in 10 or in 40 years, do you want to go, man, they're up to 30%? At some point, this is how it happens. And
Of course it is.
you do have to look at the longest term and be like, hey, it's not all worthless. It might take longer than you think, but hey, the time's going to pass. And I really don't see any reason to stay with the current dichotomy. It's
And this is the
clearly,
year where we're going to take a bigger chunk than the 0.2% that
yeah,
you.
and you have to keep it moving. So even it's like, let's say you don't win, but you move it up to 5%. That's a win. And I'm not even trying to be some like
Of course it is.
motivational, like, no, that's a win, man. If
It's a
you know,
huge win.
yeah.
Just to disrupt their ability to disregard you is a win.
Dude, you lose 5 pounds and you gotta lose 50. You don't look at that as a loss. You go, I did 5. You go, I feel this is awesome. I've been working out for a year. My bench press has gone up 10 pounds. You're like, that's 10 more than you did, man. Like, get after it. Go
Right.
for another year. It's not. And so you
And
consider
trust me, when you reach my age, if your bench press hasn't dropped 5 pounds from the
that's a
previous year,
win. I'm
that's a
30,
win.
man. When I was 18, I now look, I've already, my like
You
body standards
peaked.
have changed at 13, at 33 now. I'm like, all right, so long as I don't get, maybe I don't have 8 pack abs anymore, but I'm not like overweight. I'm like, all right, we'll take the win. Take the win. Like, and
Exactly.
there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's the opposite of you throw away your vote. That's apathetic. I think it's the opposite. I really
Yeah.
do. I legitimately think it's
Yeah.
the opposite of despair and apathy and nihilism and blackpilling is to go, let's start moving the needle, man. Let's start moving
Yeah.
the
We
needle.
got to
Why,
start
why
moving the
not?
needle.
What do you have to lose?
Don't waste your vote by not voting your values.
Precisely. Don't throw away your vote. Precisely, which is why I'm not going to go left or right. Flip it over. But yep, 1:30. I wasn't even, I just checked it. Gee, I was not even paying attention. I gotta let you go. Let's wrap this one up,
Well,
dude.
good.
I'd love to have you
Thank
on
you.
again sometime. I'll email you this link. Guys, if you go to the description, go to his website. And yeah,
Go to
dude,
MikeTermott.com. Go to goldnewdeal.org for a new relationship between us and the government we will tolerate. Goldnewdeal.org.
I will send you this link. I'd love to have you on again sometime, man. And
Me too.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Much